Hey guys, NJ here, and we have a Foxeer Arrow V3 to have a look at today. This is a 600 TVL CCD mini FPV camera. This is Foxeer's latest offering, and it is in this snazzy blue colour, which we'll see in a second, and it is an HS1195. So what is different about this to all the other hundreds of different FPV cameras out there? Well, let's have a look at one of the nice features of it. The resolution is 650 TVL in black and white, 600 TVL in colour, FPV OSD, so this is probably the kind of main feature with this. It has an OSD built in, which include a voltage, flight time and editing names a feature. Interesting. The input voltage is very wide. We have 5 to 40 volts, which is a really wide input voltage, which is interesting. The most interesting thing I've seen here is that it has direct voltage sensing, so you can wire this straight to your main rail PDB and get the flight pack voltage, which will then be displayed in the OSD on the camera, which is a really nice touch. The question is, how will that handle the kind of noise that you get on quadcopters whether you're running a capacitor or not, whether you're going to get kind of any alternating current noise from the ESCs, any voltage spikes, anything that's going to cause sort of nasty lines and bits. We shall see how that does in terms of that. The one I've gone for here, as I said, has got this blue colour. It's also got the 2.5 millimeter lens, and it is an IR blocked type of lens. So let's have a little look at the camera itself. So as I said, there is that kind of nice anodized blue. It is like it's an aluminium case, I believe, or aluminum, and I think I've actually got another older Foxeer here with the plastic case. I will chuck these both on the scales just to see what the difference is, though I'm sure it will be pretty tiny. You can see we've got a pretty big connector on the back here, which is a little different to the way companies like Runcam are now doing it, where they split the connectors up, so you've got one separately for the OSD, but we'll investigate that once we dig into the box. It looks like we have, if I get this a little closer and focus, you have VCC on the bottom, which is your main voltage in, as I said, 5 to 40 volts. Ground video audio. Audio is an interesting one, so is that audio in, or is this got a microphone in it? I wonder. We shall check. I imagine the audio maybe has to come from the VTX. I don't know. We shall see. And then we got OSD, ground, and VSEN, which is voltage sensing. So from what I've read, it does look like if you're say running a 12 volt regulator to this and you don't use the voltage sense, the voltage that will be displayed on screen will be this. So in this case it would be that 12 volts. If you then despite this being powered by 12 volts, if you also take that VSense pin and wire it to the main rail flight battery, then you'll get that dynamically changing voltage during flight. So that's what that looks like on the back anyway. So I'll take the protector off, have a quick look at the lens, so there you can see that 2.5 IR blocked lens. So there is that. Let's have a quick look at what's in the box. And nice and tightly packed by the looks of things. We have a "we'd love to hear from you" card, I'm sure you would. And we've got a manual here which looks to be giving you all the basics, which is good. It's not packed full of warranty information and God knows what else that makes these things huge and long. Yeah, all the basic information, exposure, lens, backlight, language, DPC, image adjust. So if you're running an 1177 or similar, which most of you are, all of this stuff's going to be stuff you know, but it's nice that it's briefly described in that, and then a little bit about wiring and the OSD setup, which is the bit that will be of interest to us. So there is that. We also have a box down in the bottom here. Let's quickly dig this guy out, and we have a nice matching blue anodized bracket for mounting the quad if you don't use the frame itself to mount the camera, and that will be that way around, either from the top or the bottom. And then you can see you've got that pivot in there for setting an angle. So yeah, that's a nice that's a nice thing. Imagine we've got a whole bunch of different screws, side screws, top, bottom, back plate screws, but yeah, all the usual bump. This appears to be the loom. Let's have a look at that. So yeah, you can see it looks like that's a 1, 2, 3, 4, so a 7-pin connector there. As I said, I would have preferred they split the connectors up like Runcam do it, but let's just let's see what we have here with that plugged in. So you'll have your main, I mean I'd be clipping these anyway to wire them directly, but yeah, you've got your video volts and ground, and then it looks like the purple here is where you would wire to your PDB main rail for the voltage sensing, and then audio is this one here if you choose to use it. And then what's nice actually here, you can see this cable's actually detachable. So there's the OSD portion, and it looks like it has a little pigtail here, so you can find somewhere on your frame to mount this so that it's accessible, and then you can plug in your OSD to quickly change settings. So that's actually pretty cool. I like that. Although it could have done with being just a fraction longer. I'm not sure if that's going to be accessible on all quads, but yeah, it's still nice that there's kind of a little breakout point there. So there should be, yeah, there is. So there's the actual OSD sitting there. So that's the bit we plug into, and then we plug into there, and then that's how we'll be making our OSD adjustments. So I think what I'm going to do is actually put this in my 130, which is here. That's currently got my Runcam Owl Plus in there, which I've really liked. You know, if you watch my video on the night tests of that, and the Eagle. So that guy will come out. This is an SPF3 in here. I haven't got any VBAT or anything wired up on it, and certainly no OSD. So we're going to put this guy in, which will then give us the OSD with the flight timer, and we'll directly wire up the voltage sensing, and we'll be able to see whether we get any noise in the picture from being wired up in that way, or whether it stays nice and clean. Because there's no LC filter in here at all. And yeah, we'll have a look at the OSD and the picture quality, and just see how it all works out and how good it is. So I'll get this installed, and then we'll come back and move forward from there. Okay, so here we are back with the Foxeer Arrow V3 now installed. You can see that actually looks all pretty nice. There are a few things to be aware of though. In the case of this reptile frame, this is something where the side plates are mounted to a specific width to accommodate for more traditionally cased 1177 cameras, for instance like this Owl Plus and many others that you will have seen, even the earlier Foxeer versions you can see all kind of conform to this same body width. Now the Foxeer V3 does have the same body width, but it has these lugs, and I've got an Eagle here to give you another close-up. You can look earlier in the video if you want to see the lugs I'm talking about, but these raised sections here on that Foxeer, they're this way as opposed to across. This means that when you've got a frame that's bracing from the side, you have that issue of now this frame being actually too slim to fit the camera. So I had to actually add some spacers into these onto the ends of these standoffs to actually make that frame just a little bit wider at the top to accommodate for this. So it's certainly something you have to pay attention to when it comes to if you're going to choose this camera for your frame. The V-Sense is wired directly to the PDB main rail, and I'm running the power to the actual camera off of a regulator. And I did spot in the manual, where is it? It did actually say camera video transmitter connection. Not there. Where is it? If you're using ESCs, here we go. If you're using ESCs with active braking, we recommend powering your camera system through a BEC or voltage regulator. So that was something that I talked about slightly earlier as a suspicion that it probably wouldn't be a good idea where you've got that reverse braking voltage spikes coming through from quadcopters, which of course is the application that we use it for, potentially being dangerous. Again, this is another reason why I add a capacitor to all of my builds, as I have here, just to help with that a little bit and stop some of those nasty spikes from causing damage. So they've actually pointed that out here, and I think it was sensible of them to do so. But you know, be warned, even though it's got this enormous wide input voltage, it's expecting a fairly smooth direct current, and not something where you've got a lot of kind of backfed spikes and stuff into the system. I'm sure that would introduce noise as well. It'll be interesting to see how much noise we get through this system. As I said, there's no LC filter in here. It is just a 5 volt straight to this, 5 volt back off the PDB straight to this, and then the voltage sense off the main PDB rail. So I think what we'll do now is connect this up, and I'll show you some of the OSD features. I have actually managed to get that little OSD extension and have it poke out here at the top here, so that should make access nice and easy like that. And then I can plug in and change any of the OSD options, though you probably won't need to do that too often, but as lighting conditions change throughout the day, or even season to season, you might find it's easy just to be able to get to that. And I like that, because this is one of those quadcopters that is a bit of a pain to take apart and a bit fiddly to put back together. So being able to get to the OSD via that extension is actually a really cool thing. Liking that a lot. So yeah, let's connect that up and have a look at the on-screen display and see what that looks like. Okay, so here we are, and I'm just pointing the camera up at a not very interesting part of this wall, just so you can see these display parts or components a little clearer. So obviously you have the name here on the left, which is of course editable. We have the power on, which is showing that it's a 4S at 16.5 volts, and then a timer. Now sadly the timer just you know, it kicks in when you power up. There is no way for that to be turning on when you arm and you're ready to fly. So unfortunately, I mean, it's there, and you just have to make a note of where the time is if you want to fly it without an actual flight timer on your transmitter, and you want to go by this, then you know, take off at 1 minute or 1 minute 30 or whatever. Just make a note and count from there is one option. Any of these components can be removed. The way you get into the OSD to edit it is by holding down first of all any of those. So if you hold left, that will allow us to edit the name. If you hold down, it will allow us to edit and move the voltage here. And one thing I did spot which was very nice, I'll actually show you this. If I hold down on the OSD, so it gives me the option to position this where I want, so I'm going to position it there, and when I press enter, it then flashes up the decimal place on the voltage. Now that's a really cool feature. This actually allows you to calibrate the voltage, so you can put a multimeter onto your battery, or using the balance port on your battery, check what that voltage is, and then if it's not scaling quite correctly, you can then adjust this decimal with the up and down figure to match what it actually is. That's a very cool feature. Then when you press enter, of course that will be set, and then the same here, you hold down the right side of the OSD to be able to move this around. If we go into, if you hold up, which is the kind of last direction that you don't use out of these three, it will then give us this option. So at this point we can now edit the name if we want to, or if we scroll down you can choose different types of fonts. There's three choice, some are slightly skinnier and some slightly fatter depending on your preference, and then you can actually individually turn off and on the name, time and power. So if that time is just nothing more than a distraction for you and you'd rather not have it on at all, you can just turn it off like that, and then when we exit we're back to just having the call sign and the voltage. In fact, that's probably the way I'm going to do it. So what I can then do is hold down to access that guy, and then I think what I'll do is I'll move this guy over to the right, and that's kind of all that really interests me in terms of what I want. And now you can see call sign left and battery voltage on the right, and then we're ready to go. If you just hit the center button, then you're presented with this, and this is obviously a very familiar layout for any of you guys that are doing the standard 1177 configuration. All of that is pretty much exactly as you would normally see. The only thing that I will say you should change immediately is if you go into the white balance, or is it exposure I think. There we go. The dynamic wide dynamic range is off by default, so obviously we want to turn that on, and me personally I always run that at its maximum, and then we will leave the rest of this on defaults and we will go out and fly and see how it does. So come down to test out this little guy and this Fox here. It is gusting between 15 and 20 knots, which is not ideal for a 130. The sun's on the way down, probably got another hour of sunshine left, so again this kind of environment lighting wise is a good test of any CCD camera. So let's give it a go, see what happens. Okay, so ready to give this a shot. I'm using diversity setup on these new Aomway Commander V1 goggles. There'll be a review on this coming shortly, but early impressions are very good on those. So let's get this up, and the wind seems to have calmed a little bit.